Matthew Broderick. He plays David Lightman.
He's kind of a bad boy.
He's like a cool nerd.
So we see him in class, right? Not paying attention. The teacher is trying to ask a question, gives him the whole, Mr. Lightman, can you suggest the first person to suggest reproducing without sex? And David Lightman hits him with your wife, which is just a dagger.
Bienvenido, gang, to the Just Play It podcast. I'm James.
I'm Nick.
Yeah, we've kind of been going on a hot streak here, Nick, with 80s movies. Kind of rounding out our trilogy. We just watched Mad Max, watched Escape from New York, and now the movie we're reviewing this week is WarGames. This movie's directed by John Badham. He's also done Saturday Night Fever, Dracula, a bunch of TV directing gigs, kind of like episodic one-offs. They'll just bring in a director to direct episode 9 of The West Wing or something. This movie, however, was originally directed by Martin Brest, who did Meet Joe Black, Beverly Hills Cop, Midnight Run, and ultimately Gigli.
So he's a legend.
Which is that Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez movie. And oddly enough, that is his last directing credit. So I don't know if he thought he peaked or got booed out of Hollywood.
So if I remember correctly, he got booted off of this project a couple weeks in. I couldn't find out why.
Just kind of like researching, doing some combing through some articles. It basically came down to his vision was a lot darker, like a dark thriller, and not so much like a campy, fun adventure high school hacker movie.
Well, I can see that in his other credits, such as Beverly Hills Cop. So that really seems like his personal direction.
Yeah, and seeing that these are the top billed credits for him, especially Gigli and Beverly Hills Cop, you would think this version in our reality of what WarGames became would be right up his alley.
I agree. But, hey, directing's not for everybody. This movie stars Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, Dabney Coleman, and John Wood. Just off the rip, let me just say, Matthew Broderick was a good-looking dude.
Very likable. It gave me strong Marty McFly vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little side tangent, kind of parallels the director situation. I don't know if you know the original story of Back to the Future and the original actor they had, Eric Stoltz.
No.
He was, what's that? The Elephant Man, the movie?
Yes.
Like, I just think of Family Guy when I think of it.
Oh, man.
But he's the actor who played the Elephant Man, and he was the original Marty McFly. And the problem there was he was taking the role very seriously, and it kind of got really weird. He was disagreeing with the ending. He's like, this is horrifying. You know, you come back and your future's changed. This is not right. He kind of just, it's like, dude, this is supposed to be a fun time traveling movie, and you're making it weird. So they got Michael J. Fox and brought him in, and it was a way different movie. So kind of the same with the director.
Yeah, I was gonna say he gave me vibes of another Matthew Broderick role, which was Ferris Bueller.
Oh, it's very, very strong parallels there.
Big time.
And this movie's interesting because it's half sci-fi thriller and half high school movie. It's in line with that John Hughes vibe.
Off the rip, let me just say, they walk the tightrope pretty darn well because it never feels like too much of one.
No. And there's a ton of movies that have either extraordinary prodigies that stumble their way into fantastic situations, or there's just kid hero movies where they go on this unexpected adventure. So it's not like the first time we've seen it, and it's not completely unbelievable.
Yeah. So let's jump into this. Top level, estimated $12 million budget, made $79 million gross worldwide. So box office success, box office hit right off the bat. And our log line for this movie is a young man finds a back door into a military central computer in which reality is confused with game playing, possibly starting World War III. And you got to think 1983, like computers are like, this is a big deal. You're playing with some stuff you don't really know about, right? Computers, personal computers, this idea of central intelligence really is, I think, a fun exploratory subject at this point in time. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. And James, I want you to go ahead and take it away with some plot talk.
Plot talk. Hey, here we go. This movie really is the sign of the times. 1983, Cold War, computers. That's it. Let me just start out by saying this. The first scene in this movie is vastly different than the rest of the movie. The thing I want to kind of cover here is the tone. Now, is this opening scene in like Alaska, or is this supposed to be...
I would assume in some remote military base.
Okay. Let me point out here first. Did you clock the Babe?
No.
Art LaFleur. He plays the Great Bambino in The Sandlot. He has a small role in this movie. He just plays the guard that lets in those first two characters we see, Jerry and Steve.
Didn't even make the connection. Great job.
I told you I was really good with faces. So we meet these two missile control launchers, Steve and Jerry. Steve is played by Michael Madsen. And if you Googled this guy, you'd recognize him. He's been in hella stuff.
Yeah.
I wrote down he looks like a mafia Michael Chiklis with hair. And maybe you'll agree with me. The other actor is John Spencer. He plays Jerry. He went on to have a prominent role in The West Wing. And these guys basically open up the stakes. It's a missile launch. And they're getting orders from their higher-ups to launch a missile. And Jerry can't do it. He can't bring himself together to pull the trigger, turn the key.
To fire a nuke. And you got to remember, this is Cold War era. You know, this is the Ruskies.
It's very tense because it starts out with small talk between these two guys, and then all of a sudden they're thrown into this predicament of launching a missile. Steve is ready to roll. Michael Madsen, he's ready to roll. And Jerry can't do it. And then all of a sudden Steve pulls out a gun and you're like, holy crap. I was like, wow, this is tense.
Yeah.
This is not a comedy. And then basically that transitions into a scene later where we meet a bunch of military suits and they discuss this quote unquote failure. It ended up being a test.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it was a test of willpower.
Correct. So, I mean, no secret. It's a pretty common knowledge that to fire off a nuclear missile, you need multiple people basically giving the okay, pushing buttons, turning keys all at the same time, right? It can't just be a one-man decision. And so here we're seeing, okay, well, only 22% of humans were willing to push that button. Now, that's kind of hard to believe for me because I wouldn't put someone into that role to fire a nuke who seems like they would hesitate. But it's a good premise for the movie.
You can do as much background checks or on-purpose simulation testing as you want, but you don't know how you're going to react in that moment of launching a nuke. It's a crazy situation. So
agreed.
I'm not going to say I would know what to do. So we meet the character of McKittrick, who is played by Dabney Coleman. He runs the computer facility at NORAD, which stands for North American Aerospace Defense Command. Now, Dabney, again, I recognize this guy's face immediately. Have you ever seen the masterpiece, My Date with the President's Daughter?
Yes, I have. A long time
He's
ago.
the president.
Is he?
I clocked him right away. I was like, that's the president. Will Friedle is going to date your daughter. He sits down with a bunch of government officials and one of the more prominent characters, General Behringer, played by Barry Corbin, has a great role. That guy's hilarious. And basically, McKittrick wants to remove the human aspect of missile launches. General Behringer is like, nah, we can't do that. We've been doing this for decades, literally. Let me ask you this, Nick. Is there any job in these days where you can remove the human aspect?
I believe so.
I mean, tons, right?
Yeah,
like fast food, was it not telemarketer, but just like customer service. They already do that.
A lot of jobs in the tech sector where you have machine learning writing its own code, being able to break down and replicate things like that. I mean, even taxi drivers these days with autonomous vehicles, truckers, a lot of people in the airline industry, right?
Yes.
It's just a reliability factor.
What'd you think of when you heard this proposition and watching this movie?
I mean, if it was me making the call, I'd say no. No computers get to make the judgment call on nukes. But again, in 1983, when you don't really know the power, complexity, usefulness of computers, it was probably a very real, thought process. And you also got to think about human error, right? You got to take human error out of things. What's the biggest thing you want to take human error out of? Mass extinction. So,
What about a computer error?
well, the idea is that computers make less errors. We'll find out if that's true in this movie.
That's the idea, Nick.
That's the idea. But at the end of the day, it really is. I think it's a very justifiable driving plot for the movie.
All right, that's fair. I agree with you. I wouldn't leave it up to a computer. It's my same feelings towards self-driving cars. I don't think I'll ever let the car drive for me. That's just me.
I think I would in a taxi or that kind of sense. I'd never want to own one because I enjoy the act of driving too much.
I think people who can't drive should have them because, yeah, I'd rather have a computer glitch than someone who is just a terrible driver make a mistake. But for me personally, I'm pretty great at driving. So
we can get into the high level of it later, but even computer glitches are so much more rare than a human error. Right. And so, but then, and we'll get into this later, kind of the whole idea, a lot of this movie is
a lot of foreshadowing
is, can you live with human error? Is human error more acceptable than a rare computer glitch? And I have some ideas on that later on towards the end.
What a tease.
Oh,
okay. So McKittrick, he's plugging the computers and saying X-nay on the humans. We are introduced to the war simulator, the giant computer, the WOPR, WOPR. I forgot what it stands for in the movie. I think it's like wartime operations something. Yeah. But this is going to be a very large plot device that is going to drive this plot.
It's going to the plot device.
It's literally a device in the movie and is the plot device.
Yeah.
It's the reason, the problem, and we'll see if it's the solution by the end. We're introduced to Matthew Broderick. He plays David Lightman. Like you said, very much like a Ferris Bueller type character. Not so much a slacker, just more of a nerd.
Yeah, but he's kind of a bad boy. So
he's like a cool nerd.
So we see him in class, right? Not paying attention, talking to, the cute girl in class.
It's played by Ali Sheedy, who is she's from the Breakfast Club.
Yes. And then the teacher is trying to ask a question. No one's answering. He's disrupting the class.
All right, Lightman. Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
And the class just loses it. It's like you're setting yourself up as a teacher with that one, asking that kid.
Just got leveled.
Right? Like stepping on a rake moment.
Decimated. R.I.P. to that teacher.
Yeah.
And his ego. Fun fact, it was the crew's laughter. They didn't know the punchline. So they left that. They left all the camera guys, gaffers.
I love fun little things like that.
They left it in the movie because they thought that was hilarious, and they probably went home to their families and told that joke. So obviously, our boy David gets in trouble, gets sent to the principal office. There's a moment where he pulls out a drawer and sees a bunch of code words written down, random words. They're all crossed out. The one at the bottom is pencil. And immediately I'm thinking, this is the password to get into the school computer.
Yep.
And I gotta say, I just personally like this because back then we were just learning about computers. Nowadays, what's the main line that a hacker says when he's trying to get into someone's system? They say something like, I'm going to hack into the mainframe. And then they start typing away. Here, it's simple. It's the early 80s. Computers are on the rise. And people don't know how to password protect. They just have it written down. David sees it, and he types it in. I just liked it. I appreciate it. We weren't at the level of, oh, we're just going to do some fictitious thing. Or like when they zoom in on surveillance camera and they say enhance. It's not a thing. The quality is what it is. When you zoom in, it gets worse.
It's just a set amount of pixels.
So it just tickled me. I was like, yeah, it's just like some parents writing down their password.
Simpler times.
That's basically what it is. I liked it. We cut away to the missile launch room where the first scene took place, and Jerry is there kind of packing up his stuff. I don't really know what he has to pack up. I feel like that's a job where you just kind of roll in with your clothes and wait for the orders and then leave. But there's a guy removing the chairs and installing the computer device on the launch controls. And Jerry is scathing at this guy. He's literally like staring at him, and the guy's just working. We focused on Jerry for a long time. We even cut away and then cut back to Jerry, and it's like closer up, and he's still just shaking his head.
You know how uncomfortable it'd be to be the guy installing the computers on the device?
I was like,
this guy's just mean mugging you for like 5 straight minutes while you're working.
It's not his fault. He's like, I hate you.
It's weird.
Fast forward, we're back in Seattle. We're focused on David and his home life. Basically, he sees a ad for a game company called Protovision. They're just advertising new games coming, and he wants those games badly.
Simple premise.
He's like, I'm going to go hack into their system. I'm going to find them. He goes into his room. He has this super strong computer that he built. It can hack into other computers through phone lines. We see this earlier where he changes his grades and he changes Jennifer's with the pencil login. But Jennifer's like, no, don't do that. But then later she's like, wait, do it.
A lot of foreshadowing when she was like, turn it back. Like, don't be messing around with this stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be playing with things that you don't fully understand. But then later on when she was like, no, change it back. It's like, oh, okay. You're not his good conscience in this movie.
Like, never mind. And yeah, now that you said that, that kind of makes a better story point, foreshadowing and character development of Jennifer. But reading after the fact, I learned that the writers wrote in more Ali Sheedy scenes because her and Matthew Broderick had just had good chemistry. So I thought it was one of those where they originally wanted her to be the good conscience, but then thought, hey, we're going to bring her back in for this scene where David hacks into the WOPR and we're going to bring her into Oregon. And they just kind of integrated her more into the story. So I literally thought it was like a quick fix.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That little foreshadowing.
My one issue with the scene was when he's hacking into all the Sunnyvale computers is it shows all of their phone numbers. And the area code on all of them is 311. That's the area code for New York. Growing up in the Bay Area and having a lot of friends who live down in Sunnyvale, California, spent a lot of time. I went to high school in Sunnyvale, California. Okay.
Correct.
It's a 408 area code.
Facts.
That's a very, again, what I was talking about earlier as far as like suspending disbelief, nobody cares, nobody double checks. I get that. This is an easy one. This is a pretty easy one to just, what's the area code for Sunnyvale? 408. Perfect.
Nick, I hate to be a dick and be like the smartass in the room, but that is incorrect. Hit the buzzer. 311 is just, it's part of the N11 government code. I looked it up too because I was like, yeah, where is 311? When you look it up on Google, there's just that quick answer that says New York City. But if you click on that, it says 311 is like 411, like information. 511 is traffic. 911, obviously emergencies. 311 is like a municipal government area code. It's just like you got to report a pothole. You call 311.
That still doesn't make sense though.
The reason why is because it's not as popular as 911, 511, 411, but it's not a real area code. So they felt it was like, when you see 555 in movies all the time.
Yeah.
It's basically a no limits phone number.
Just saying.
I will say, I do agree with you. Area codes shouldn't be off limits. It's really that next set of numbers that they use the 555,
Yeah, make it 408 555.
I thought that was the info or the traffic one, but it's just like an underutilized government code. Riveting stuff here on the Just Play It podcast. Did you think you were going to be learning about area codes today?
You got a pothole outside? Now you know.
Yeah, and he's looking up Sunnyvale because that's the city in the ad for Protovision. Fun fact, it's where Atari was founded. I'm assuming that's why they went that direction.
Yep.
Basically, he's asking his computer to call all these numbers. This is how he taps into them via the phone line. That's kind of happening in the background. We catch up with David later at the arcade, and this is where Jennifer's like, I actually want my grades changed. And then he's like, oh, okay. He's kind of playing cute with her, even though he already did it. So they go back to his house, and this is where his computer was doing all that work and dialing in. It catches a Sunnyvale number that he believes is Protovision, but it's actually the WOPR. It's that war computer.
I wonder why that's a Sunnyvale number. I mean, there are some military bases out there, Moffett Field and whatnot, but
it was a way to connect where the game company was and where they just have like a random outpost. Later, there's like that scientist that says one of our outposts in Sunnyvale had like a hole in it or something.
Oh, gotcha. I feel like government security is also going to be a big factor, a big theme for me in this movie.
Yeah, it is kind of a problem.
So he taps into WOPR and he gets this response of, do you want to play a game? And there's this list of games. There's chess, there's checkers, there's, all these simple games that go down. And then you get into things like thermonuclear war simulation, Pacific
guerrilla warfare, Desert Storm warfare.
Yeah, just all these different, very military terms.
At this point, it's listing all these words and terms, and there's a close-up of Matthew Broderick, and he kind of looks shocked, and he literally says, oh my God, like he discovered something. And then I was like, oh, he kind of knows what he's doing. Is this guy evil? But instead, he just wants reassurance by some nerds, some computer tech guys that I guess are his affiliates, his friends.
He probably thought he found some really sick games. He was like, holy shit.
It seemed like he found something he wasn't supposed to, which is why I found the next scene a little confusing, where he goes to this, what is this place?
It almost looked like an early hardware startup almost.
Okay.
If I had to guess, but...
Let's introduce these guys real quick. Jim is the guy he's looking for. He's played by Maury Chaykin. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And there is obviously a squeaky voice nerd named Malvin. He's played by comedian Eddie DeZine.
Wow, where'd you get this?
I was trying to break into Protovision.
This didn't come from Protovision.
You bet it didn't. Ask him where it did come from, Jim. Go ahead, ask him.
It seems like we both had notes about how we immediately recognized this guy's voice.
It's such a recognizable voice, just right off the bat.
Because he kind of talks like this.
Yeah, but Jim, you're giving away all our best tricks.
I pegged it right away as a big cartoon lover growing up. In Dexter's lab, he's Dexter's arch nemesis, Mandark.
Excuse me, sir, but may I please relocate myself to a closer location to the board so I can achieve the optimum effect of your education?
I pegged it right off the bat.
Wow, that's quite the pull. That's not where I recognized him from. It's just, I was confused if he had trailblazed the nerd voice and he was the first to do it and everyone else copied him, or if he was these iconic voices that I've known through cartoons. So I recognized him after looking him up. He's Ned, the Bueno Nacho manager in Kim Possible.
Not enough lettuce, too much salsa, and don't get me started on those beans.
That is this guy. This guy's voice is the quintessential nerd voice.
I mean, he has so many credits for cartoons.
Oh, so many voiceover credits, yeah.
He was the know-it-all kid in Polar Express.
Is that meme kid?
Yeah, the dead eyes.
Well, anyway, David brings the printout of the list of games to Jim and Malvin. This is where I got a little confused. It seems like he's looking for reassurance. Like I said, in the scene prior, it seemed like what I interpreted, it seemed like he discovered something he was not supposed to discover. And he brings it to Jim and Malvin, and they say, yeah, no, you shouldn't be looking at this. This is probably military. He kind of just doesn't want to hear it. And he's like, no, he's like, I want those games. I was like, well, I thought you were coming here for some second opinions because these guys work with computers as their profession. So it's kind of like, it's like you really want to do heroin. We don't do heroin, but let's say there's a crackhead. They really want to do heroin. They're like, is heroin that bad? And they ask somebody and they're like, yeah, it's pretty terrible. You'll get addicted. and your body will start deteriorating. And you just kind of go, nah, you're just joking. I still want to do it.
Yeah, it did seem that way. And these guys are clearly hackers as well, because they're not surprised that he's hacked into Protovision, or the thought that he has.
Jim doesn't think it's Protovision.
He doesn't, but like he's not shocked by the idea. Like he's just like, oh, you hacked into this video game company. Cool.
So David's hellbent on playing those games. Jim and Malvin are saying, hey, don't go down this road. David's going to do it anyway. He's just looking for advice. Jim says, oh, there's a backdoor password that I would program into software that I create so I can always get in no matter how much security on the front end the user puts in. So that's where we get the idea of just a single one word, easy phrase, catch-all password to just let you in. They call it the backdoor. And Malvin suggests that he starts with clues of the first game listed, which is Falcon's map, I believe.
Maze.
Falcon's Maze, yes.
Yes. So David goes to a library. Yes, 1983, a library. And he goes ahead and he finds out who this Dr. Stephen Falcon is. And subsequently who McKittrick is, John McKittrick. He basically finds this article how Falcon basically programmed like a lot of this stuff for the government. You know, pinpointed all of this in the library. So shout out to the Dewey Decimal System. Big time.
Because in my notes I said the how he pinpointed this before Google is a mystery. And then you wrote 3 words, Dewey Decimal System.
Librarians everywhere should be proud.
David does some insane detective work and discovers that Stephen Falcon is the original programmer of this WOPR computer. He doesn't know it's WOPR. He thinks it's Protovision. And echoing Jim's statement, he says, find out everything you know about the programmer.
And he finds out Falcon's kid is in this research, and the kid's name is Joshua. And so, of course, what's he going to make the password, James, in 1983?
Joshua. No special characters or numbers needed.
Nope. Just Joshua. It's not even 7 characters.
And again, shout out Jennifer. She's the one who kind of sparked this idea in David because she was just said how much he loved his son. And we learned that he had passed away, and so had Falcon's wife.
Yes.
Falcon's dead too, allegedly.
They're all dead. Joshua's dead. Falcon's dead. Wife's dead. Dead. A lot of dead. So using Joshua, he goes ahead, he gets into WOPR, what he still thinks is Protovision, and decides to play what we all would decide to play, global thermonuclear war. And he has the decision that he could either be, part of the USSR squad, or if he could be part of the American squad. As a good red-blooded American in 1983, he chooses the Ruskies, and he decides that his first place to attack is going to be Las Vegas.
Screw that soulless city.
Yeah. Then we get to see the war room where WOPR is now running this simulation that no one knows is a game/simulation. Shit starts getting wild.
It hits the fan real quick. And I want to take this moment, Nick, to pose my question and kind of my biggest gripe with the movie. I see that you have some sort of counter argument, and I'm very interested to hear it. Not so much to debate this, but just hopefully to get a clear answer. I just want to ask the question. So the simulation, it's part of WOPR's code, and they establish in the opening scene a test could be ran to simulate a missile launch. Mm-hmm. However, why is the simulator hooked up to the main display system? Why is it so easily mistaken for an actual attack? I feel like, I'm no computer guy, but you should probably make the program look entirely different from a real life scenario, or just keep it off the main floor displays, because I am pretty sure the war simulation is to develop strategies. Is that what you gathered?
No, that's not what I gathered.
Well, that's what they said to us. They said, oh, chess, poker, whatever, they're all basic strategy games, and this war simulator is supposed to draw up scenarios and situations and outcomes. Am I wrong?
Well, it's supposed to make the decision of when to fire off the nuclear missiles to take that human element out of it, of when to make that decision. And so it needs to learn and create all these strategies so it knows when to fire the missiles.
See, I didn't get that. I thought when they said remove the human element, that was when the decision has been made by a human, aka the president and other higher ups. They need a computer to just follow through with it, because that opening scene, it failed because of the last guy in line who was just supposed to turn the key.
Correct.
So that's where I disagree with that a little bit. I understand the computer can launch the missile, and that's where the original problem was. But now you're saying it's supposed to make the decision.
Correct. It's supposed to make the decision. It's supposed to say, okay, no human action needed. I've run these simulations. I know what the outcome will be, how close the enemy has to be before I attack, where to attack. Yeah, so it's the one making all these decisions. It takes most of the human element out of it. Now, the one thing that it does bring up in this movie is that the missiles will only fire if they reach DEFCON 1, which means all hell's breaking loose. It's wartime. That's DEFCON 1.
And who controls when it's DEFCON 1? Is that humans or is that the computer?
That's humans. So basically, DEFCON 1 is I'm giving the computer full command to make these decisions.
All right. I definitely didn't interpret it that way. I thought it was only for the pulling of the trigger, not necessarily the decision.
Gotcha.
If McKittrick is really trying to remove the entire human element, then I'm definitely not about that. If he wanted to just do it for pulling the trigger, sure. But making the whole decision, nah.
See, because that's what's so important with the whole decision, because if you just made it about following through, then you still have the issue of one person or, just a couple people being in control of the decision, and there's still a human element to it, right? Like the president saying, do it, and you still have a human element to it. And so this would be, this has run so many simulations, it can't mess up, right? And I mean, we still have that decision today, right? Or that thought process today with like self-driving vehicles of like the software is so secure, it's run through every scenario, it has every sensor in the world, it can make decisions in a split millisecond, so it can't screw up. And honestly, if I can just get on a soapbox real quick, that's where a lot of technology messes up. You have to acknowledge that there can be failure at some point in the system. Your argument has to be, it's a better option than what we have currently. Not that it's foolproof, because absolutely nothing is. But anyway, we're going to see it play out here, as we already are. Right? So the simulations go and everyone's freaking out. Eventually, they find out that it was just a simulation. All right, they finally find out like, oh, this isn't real. They basically check with boots on the ground and say the Russians are at the door. And they're like, no, they're not. There's no one here. We've checked all our local radars. Nothing's showing up. And then they kind of diffuse the situation. Now, my thought process here. Once it almost caused World War III the first time on what you realize was a simulation error, I'd shut that thing down. I'd be like, we got something bad going on here. But they're just like, that was one in a million. It'll never happen again.
They're like, hey, maybe, we should do some more extensive R&D or make sure this is ready to roll. Doesn't seem like it's ready, because that was not cool. We all thought we were going to die. That was my other kind of main gripe. It was, once you kind of learn that it caused this mass hysteria in the war room and you're ready to start firing off nukes, or you thought millions of people were going to die, wouldn't you kind of back up and be like, hey, let's maybe just put the computer thing on ice, McKittrick, and let's rework it and we'll circle back?
Yes, 100%.
I do have another main gripe, but I'll bring it up later. Okay. And this is all just plot and how it works out. I can't really say too much because I'm not a computer programmer. And again, this was at the dawn of computers, so I'm not really going to give them too much crap about it. But I'm just saying, just a couple plot holes there for me, technologically wise.
For me as well. So anyway, we get to the next morning. David is hanging out at home, and eventually the news comes on, and the news is blasting about basically World War III almost started because a computer simulation of nuclear war. And he immediately puts it together. He's like, oh, shit. I don't think that should make the news.
I was going to ask, is that something that would be on the news to kind of like point out the military's failures, or would they keep that under wraps?
Especially when you're in the middle of a Cold War with Russia, you keep that under wraps. You don't really share with them, hey, it's not quite the middle of the Cold War, but it's still a thing. David gets a call from Jennifer, who, my issue here, she is oddly aroused by this. She's like, did you see the news? And he's like, yeah, this is crazy. And he's like, what do we do? And she's like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Just don't say anything. Keep your head down. Can I tell my friends? And she has this like smile on her face. And it's like,
you think this is a game?
You should be panicking. Yeah, it's like you almost started World War III. And she's like kind of like biting her lip a little bit. And I'm like, what is wrong with you, girl?
Creative choice there, I guess.
Definitely. She was like kind of like really excited about it all. So David tries to shut it down. You can't stop playing the game. Like, you have to win the game.
The primary goal of WOPR, he asked, is to win the game. So he shuts it down. He shuts his personal computer down, but WOPR's still whopping off at Colorado.
Still playing the game. I think he's got like 52 hours left before the game ends, and WOPR is going to make its decision.
Because you need a time limit.
Always a time limit.
David is outside a 7-Eleven. He gets swooped up by the FBI. They just swoop this miner off the streets and then just abduct him. Take him all the way to Colorado, which is interesting that the FBI doesn't take him in for questioning. They just kind of bring him to the source and have the computer scientists talk to him instead.
Yeah, it was
just some 80s. That's just some 80s screenwriting.
Very 80s stuff. Yeah, just buy into it.
So he's brought into NORAD, McKittrick, and he doesn't trust this kid. He's wondering if he's working with someone. Here's another little mini gripe I have. There's that War Center nerd scientist who says it was just a simulation, and he's the one who mentions there was a backdoor hole in our Sunnyvale phone number or whatever. He says it was a simulation. Everyone's like, oh, okay, it's just simulation. But McKittrick is hell-bent on pinning it on this kid, and he really thinks there's a war brewing up, and he thinks David is a spy. So when it happens the second time, he's like, no, this isn't a simulation. It's this kid. So it's like, wouldn't you kind of just, if you've discovered it was a simulation the first time, wouldn't you think it was a simulation the next time?
Yeah, but he thinks it's the Russians messing with who hacked it in, and that David's working with the Russians. And that's why he's like, he has to have help. There's got to be someone else helping him who's now hacking into it and is purposely trying to make WOPR fire off nukes.
All the same suits from the beginning of the movie, they all sit down and discuss this mess up. There's a moment where McKittrick actually spits out his gum and his secretary puts it in her mouth. And that was gross.
That was weird.
So he sits down with the suits. General Behringer fucking loves that the computer fucked up. He's like sitting there, he's just sniffing the cigar. He's like, yeah, like, how you feel now? Kind of like real cocky about it.
I'd be too. If I was Team Human and the computer fucked up, I'd be like, your little clicky ping ping computer couldn't do it.
Yeah, and this is where in the background, WOPR Joshua Jr. is still playing the game. So David's detained at this point. They're discussing the malfunction, but WOPR's still whopping and popping off.
Now, it's an interesting thing that happens in the movie. It's called either WOPR. It's also called Joshua. So some people call the supercomputer Joshua. I
thought it was only David and, spoiler alert, Stephen Falcon that called it Joshua.
They do. I don't know when that
because
happened.
They know the truth.
Well, they know the truth of that's a password. But
yeah, it was. I get what you're saying, because at first we learned it's the password, but then they start referring to it as Joshua. I think it's just because it's a better name than WOPR.
And maybe they call it that because that was like Falcon's kid, and his real son was named Joshua, and his like creation they called Joshua as well. I don't know.
Maybe he called his son WOPR Jr.
Might call my son WOPR Jr. now that I think about it.
WOPR, Junior Bacon Burger WOPR.
We can't do that right now. We might do a whole episode on that commercial though. So David's detained there, and eventually, I just don't know why this happens in movies all the time. Something happens outside the room.
It's this creepy guy trying to hit on the secretary, and she needs to call HR because he is violating all the signs of unwanted forward moves.
And all of a sudden, McKittrick has to like run out of the room and leave this kid in this unattended room and just says, "Don't go anywhere." Granted, a few moments ago, they're like, "Russian spy, dangerous." And now they're like, "Stay in this unlocked room and I'll be right back." I accept it. I'll just let that one go. Terrible cybersecurity, terrible personnel security, personal physical security, just all around, just terrible, terrible security from this, I would assume, should be most highly guarded government facility. The whole movie hinges on the lack of security, but my goodness.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Because before he gets detained in the infirmary, he is left alone. And that's where he sneaks off and logs onto a computer and finds Falcon's address. And he
finds out Falcon's still alive.
He believes he's still alive. Which I didn't know if that was confirmed or if I think it was just a hunch at that point. But he did just find the address and wanted to go investigate for himself.
Yes, and he was going under a different alias at the time, but I think WOPR told him, hey, pension checks are still getting sent out to this individual, and so he's like, all right, I have to go find Falcon. He's the only one who is going to know how to stop this. So he breaks out, and conveniently, he's like, there's a tour going on through this war facility that he kind of blends in with. And
undetected, makes it to a payphone, calls Jennifer, says he needs a plane ticket to Oregon. And I don't know if she's doing the same thing they did earlier in the movie where she's hacking into a system and reserving a ticket, or if she's literally buying it like an honest human being. I guess it would be the
I don't
latter.
think she knows how to hack, so I think she's probably just buying it. Like, because I think we find out she's like 17. 17-year-olds could just go buy tickets and fly in the 80s. That was a pretty simple thing to do.
It's pretty shocking how you could just, pretty much like in the 60s, just walk onto the tarmac, go onto the plane. It's like the bus.
Everybody wore suits, and the Pan Am stewardesses wore short skirts, and they offered you martinis.
Martini, sir. Ow.
So they find Stephen Falcon. He's just living by himself on an island. We find out the government, quote unquote, made up his death story.
Jennifer showed up as well. She flew into Oregon because they wrote her in.
Jennifer is there as well.
By the way.
And they take a ferry to this island and they find him. And basically, this is just a really fun look into the absurdity of nihilism. He's just become a nihilist. Nothing matters. There's no meaning to anything. None of the decisions you make really affect anything. He's just really gone off the deep end. And who can blame him? His wife and kid died. We never find out how, but his wife and kid died.
I think maybe they said the reason, but it's besides the point. But yes, this man is jaded. He has given up on life. He seems to be having a chill time with his remote-controlled flying pterodactyl.
Yeah, loves dinosaurs. Big dinosaur guy.
I think the dinosaur thing came up because he was saying extinction is natural, and he's basically fine with watching the world nuke itself because the Earth will go on, nature will go on. That's why there's like the parallels with the dinosaurs. It's like, yeah, that was a whole era, but they all got wiped out. He's really hung up on it. For as cool, calm, and collected as he is very much no F's given.
The one thing that kind of confused me a little bit, and maybe I shouldn't be reading into this, he mentions like, hey, the good news is that we're 3 miles away from one of the blast sites. So like it's going to just evaporate us quickly. Like it'll be great. It'll be a spark of light and then we're done. Did he know that WOPR was going to do this? Because he put himself by a blast site and he's like, nuclear war is inevitable with this machine running things.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was referring to just a general big city or if he was tapped into the WOPR.
I mean, he's in Oregon. In 1983, Portland ain't on nobody's hit list.
I think it was even Salem was the address. I don't know where that is.
Yeah, it's up on the coast there, I think. I don't know Oregon geography. Sorry, Oregonians who are listening to this, no clue where Salem, Oregon
Sorry,
is.
Oregonites. But yeah, he says that, and you're like, oh wow, that was a real buzzkill there, Steven.
Yeah,
I kind of laughed at this line. He's like, oh, maybe we'll all die of a nuclear war. Or maybe you'll live long enough to have a son. Watch him die. It's like, oh, this guy is not over that.
How could you be?
There's
no comeback from that one either.
Once
the guy tells you that, you just go like, all right, dude.
You're like, all right, I guess I'll just make my way out of your house and go fuck myself.
But he did bring up an interesting thing that comes up later in the movie, so we got to go over it. He talks about tic-tac-toe, and he asks, do you still play tic-tac-toe? And they said no, and the reason why is because it's pointless, right? You can always tie. If you play it correctly, whoever goes first, it's just always a tie. You can't win tic-tac-toe. And so basically tic-tac-toe to him is like life. It's pointless. No matter what decisions you make, it's a predetermined outcome, and there's no winning. And you can see that the contrast from WOPR earlier was that the only outcome in the simulation was to win. And here, Falcon is saying, life is pointless. There are no winners. And he distinctly mentions, I was never able to teach. This is where he calls it Joshua. He goes, I was never able to teach Joshua that. For all the simulations and the learning he did, could never teach him that, sometimes there's the best decision is to do nothing.
Well said.
Then we get to, they yell at him, if you're, and she gives him this whole, right after he gave him the whole, you could watch your son die. She goes, if your son was alive, like you would treat this differently. To me, I'm like, yeah, no shit.
Low blow, Jennifer.
And then we have the all is lost moment. And they go outside and there's no boat to get back to shore. And she's like, we'll swim. And David's like, I can't swim. And I wanted to learn how to swim. And she, the whole thing, like, he's like, it's my fault. She's like, no, it's not. And he's like, I wish I wasn't like this. And then the self-pity just really caught me. Cause it's like, it's not who you are. It's like, you made a stupid decision to try and hack into video games. You made a bad decision.
Just wait 6 months like the rest of us, or 3 years these days.
But all of a sudden helicopters come. We think here comes the government, which they're hiding and running from. But at this point, if you're trying to get back to the facility and save the world, you should just be like, pick me up.
Yep.
What are you running away from? If you only have like 12 hours left to save the world, what are you going to do? Run away from there and still be stuck on this island? But no, it is Falcon, Dr. Falcon, who knows how to fly a helicopter.
No, there's a pilot. He's just riding shotgun.
Oh, was it? It was a little dark. I couldn't see. So
he wasn't wearing the headphones either. So he's just wearing those chopper blades to the ears.
I didn't quite get to, does he have?
I believe it's it's kind of confusing. It's like, are these the feds? Is this NORAD? Did he make a call and say, hey, this is the Falconator. I need a ride ASAP. And they showed up in 15 minutes. I guess, Air Force, they can have a base nearby and lickety split them over to Colorado and, call in a favor. Because this one pilot, I believe, is the same guy that drives the Jeep into the facility.
Yeah, you're right, because there was a Jeep driver. So let's get to that.
Which crashes, by the way. And again, another fun fact, this was accidental.
Really?
Yep, they accidentally crashed that Jeep. They were supposed to bust through the fence, but it wasn't supposed to go horribly wrong. Yeah, and I was like, wow, that was really ballsy of a stunt move. And I learned that was an accident and a couple stunt guys got hurt. Not seriously, but, they kept it in.
Good for them. Again, with the shit security, like a Jeep, just like this super...
No one's outside. And they're like, a car just crashed through the gate, but it's probably nothing. It's one of our guys.
Then they get to get out of it after the crash and then sprint into the facility. Nobody's stopping them.
How would they get in? I guess it's the pilot Jeep man.
He's just that dude.
He's that guy.
He is him.
He is him.
He is him. So they get into the war room. WOPR's freaking out.
WOPR is sending nukes everywhere all around the United States. Fictional ones.
Dr. Falcon is pretty casual, pretty, like, hey, good to see you, Behringer. Kind of weird. And he
it's basically... whatever, I'm dead, but not.
Yeah, and he talks to Behringer, and he basically is like, dude, this isn't real. This is not real. This is all a simulation. And I thought Behringer came off the ledge pretty fast. He was just like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like after you heard Falcon out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because he makes a real truth punchline. He says, you're supposed to be the human, not the machine. Like, sending in nukes to USSR. And so it's like, oh, snap, General. You were Team Human in the beginning, but now you're getting called the Machine because you're ready to just start pulling triggers and killing millions. Basically, they call around to their outpost and they're trying to really convince them that this is just a simulation. It's not real. Stick with us. We need to pump the brakes. Listen to me. And a lot of this is just hanging on fate. Or, excuse me, it's hanging on faith. Believing Falcon. I mean, he's a viable source. Granted, he's a crazy hermit who wanted out and faked his death. But, they take his word for it. They let the quote-unquote missiles crash into the United States. They check in with all the outposts, a little suspense there, and everyone says, we're here, we're fine, we're cool. And we're like, all right. And they're all celebrating. And we're like, cool. Movie over. Nope. WOPR's got plans. This confused me. Why did WOPR switch teams? Well, he was playing against David originally when David logged in as Dr. Stephen Falcon.
Correct.
And he picked, and that's the other thing, he picked to be the USSR, David did.
Mm-hmm.
But WOPR's controlling the USSR and sending in all those fake nukes. Yeah.
No. Their concern is not getting nuked. Their concern is firing the nukes. Because if they fire the nukes at Russia.
Right before, all these nukes were coming into quote unquote the United States, and that's why they had to call their outposts and make sure they were still alive after they crashed into the United States. And then WOPR starts sending in nukes from the United States, like real ones.
No. It's all part of the simulation. So in the simulation, nukes are coming in from Russia, and they think that they're real. And Dr. Falcon's saying they're not real.
Right.
They're just part of the simulation.
Right. But wasn't David the original player one who picked Russia and was the one sending those nukes? But then WOPR kind of carries it away for him?
Pretty much, yeah. He continues to run the
so
simulation.
That confused me.
Yeah, I could see that.
Okay. Just want to bring that up. But yeah, so WOPR's, he's sending off actual missiles from the United States to the USSR.
Now, about 5 minutes ago in this movie, they make the decision to go to DEFCON 1, which means WOPR has full control of the nukes.
The WOPness is loose.
And at this point in the movie, I'm yelling, get out of DEFCON 1, get out of DEFCON 1. It can't fire if it's not in DEFCON 1.
Okay, so I didn't pick that up, so that's a good point you bring up. When it says it's the computer takes control at DEFCON 1. That's a major thing to know, and will lead to less confusion. But WOPR, Joshua, locks everybody out. The master password doesn't work, nothing works. They're locked out. Seems like we're on the brink of the next World War.
It's inevitable at this point.
They get back in by typing in games.
Basically, do you want to play a game?
Yeah. Shall we
kind of jigsaws
play a game? Yeah.
Harkening back to the Dr. Falcon conversation, it's do you want to play tic-tac-toe? And that's the only game that WOPR wants to play.
It wasn't on the list, but it's the only one that would allow the user to log into and play with Joshua. So he plays tic-tac-toe with them and loses, and then it's David's
that doesn't lose, it's ties.
Or sorry, ties. That's the whole point. And then it's David's idea to elect that the computer play itself and learn from the mistakes. And then we're just watching this scene where WOPR's trying to play tic-tac-toe against itself, and it refuses to lose, and it cannot win.
Yeah, it runs millions of simulate. I don't know how many outcomes there are in tic-tac-toe, possible outcomes, but it runs through all of them. And then it just kind of blows up. Not blows up, but like short circuits.
No. It just says like you cannot win, hence the best way to win is to not play.
Right.
And then but that's like connected to the missile launch somehow. I don't know. It's a little hokey for me.
Basically, all the games that it plays, poker, chess, checkers, it learns strategy. That's kind of the idea, right? And so it had never considered the strategy of nobody wins. And so the best strategy is to not play, not to start the game so that you can't lose. Because they had a really good point at the beginning of the movie where we were talking about where basically WOPR said the only goal is win. And now you're seeing the screen showing up and then it runs back through the nuclear simulations again and says no winner, no winner, no winner, now that it knows it's a possible outcome. So I got that. I thought it made sense in this universe to me.
Okay. The WOPR shuts it down. No war. No one can win, which is a great message about war. Best decision to not engage and hope both sides agree. And I was thinking, I hope they had an epilepsy warning for that last scene because it was really blinking white and black, white and black, white and black.
Yeah, that room was a rave.
It was like a rave.
Yeah. I had a question about the whole tic-tac-toe thing. So basically all David did was say, play tic-tac-toe with yourself. And
he said, select 0 players so that it could play with itself.
Now, earlier, Dr. Falcon was saying I could never get him to understand tic-tac-toe and how there's no outcome. But he programmed tic-tac-toe in. So you're telling me the super smart scientist never ran this? Just never said play tic-tac-toe with yourself and see what the outcome? I was like, that just seems a little like, oh, now in this moment, I realized to get it to learn, it has to play against itself. I was like, I feel like when he programmed this, I feel like that should have been one of the first tests.
Yeah, it's just stuff like that. It's just like little plot holes or stuff that doesn't make sense that just took me out of it minorly, but not terribly.
My favorite part about the ending is there's this tension the whole time with David and then the government people, right? And there's like no resolution. They never say, wow, I'm sorry, kid, or hey, good job, or whatever. But at the end, McKittrick just goes up to him and just gives him like this attaboy hair tussle. I was like, that was weird.
David does it back. He's like, oh, you tussle me, I'll tussle you.
And that's the end of the movie. Like, there's just, which I'm okay with the movie just deciding to end sometimes. Like, you don't need to see all the resolution. I in this day and age, I thought it was refreshing that we never see like the Jennifer David love story ever blossom. Like, that wasn't part of the movie. They're like, no love story subplot. We get that they're into each other. We get that they're there for each other. But like, I don't think there was ever like, there wasn't even a kiss.
There was.
Was there one on the island? Maybe
the I can't swim scene.
Yeah. Okay. So that was it. And then from there on out, that was just kind of the end of that. So I could appreciate that.
Yeah. We get it.
Yeah.
Young and in love. Well, that wraps up plot talk. We have ran through this whole movie. I just want to go some quick nitpicks. So there's a corn scene. Do you remember this?
I honestly thought, and we'll explain this to the audience, I thought it was an ingenious way to eat corn.
That's a great way to butter corn.
So basically, this guy butters a piece of bread, and it's like really globby on the bread,
saturated,
and then he puts the corn cob in there like a hot dog. And he's
palming the bread slice and contorting it to the corn shape.
And then he just rotates the corn inside of the buttered bread. I was fucking shook.
That's gonna stick with me. I might just if I have bread like that, I might just butter my corn like that from now on.
Same. It was genius.
Do you think they called the Russians or the Soviets and said sorry?
In 1983, not a chance.
But I mean, they were really kind of messing up there for a second. They were accusing them. They're like, we're really not doing anything. And then they're about to send off missiles. Do you think they just called them up and said, that wasn't cool. I'm sorry.
Are you talking in real life or in the movie?
The movie.
Okay. I thought you meant like in real life. I was like,
no, real life. It was bad blood.
No, because like at that time, everything was like a counter operation psyops, like, oh, we're not doing anything, trust us, it's just our computer messing up, like if we're overreacting, don't worry about it. If you would have told the Russians that, they would have been like, sure, American,
okay, like, comrade.
Yeah, no, there was zero communication. For
an 80s movie, this didn't really have a lot of corny or cheesy or miscues on the editing. I thought it was pretty good. This movie was so good, it prompted President Reagan to up cybersecurity. And a few years later, in 1986, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was enacted in response to fears of computer hacking.
So this is really interesting because I can't say for sure. I don't think this has necessarily prompted it, but this has actually become a pretty common practice as far as the government using fiction to up security. If you want to look it up, it's called the Red Cell program. And it was actually started, I think, during the Cold War. Guys who write, say, the Jack Ryan books, espionage books, things like that, is they actually bring these creative minds together once a year. There's a summit, and they give the guy a scenario and say, okay, they want to send anthrax to the president. Like, write your most creative way that you would make that happen. And they tried to find ways to break into bases, kidnap people, and then they write it all up, and then they analyze these creative stories and go like, this could happen, this couldn't happen, and then they update security protocol based on that. I think it went away for a while, and then the CIA, after 9/11...
brought it back out of retirement.
Yep, as a way to brainstorm ways to attack the United States. So the Red Cell program, that's what it's called.
That's pretty sweet.
I think that's really cool when pop culture, when that kind of thought process can actually like inform what we're doing. So I thought that was really cool because that's actually become a pretty common practice this day and age to use creative thinking to try to avoid disaster.
That's pretty sick. I did not know that. Thank you for sharing. But literally, Reagan saw this movie and thought, oh, maybe we should up our security. And maybe that phenomenon sparked that idea that you just told me.
It could have. What do you think the increase in percentage of hackers went up? Like kids who saw this movie and was like, oh, yeah.
Probably tremendously because they saw it was cool, a likable young actor playing the character who is hacking into video game systems or making plane tickets.
And he wasn't a nerd. He was like the cool kid.
Yeah, he was just kind of like a underachiever, like you said, bad boy genius.
Yeah.
This is the first movie that's kind of highlighting computers and what they can do and their faults. And from what I found, it was the first movie to use the term firewall for computer security in a movie. The term's been around for a long time, but I believe it coined the phrase for cybersecurity.
That's awesome.
What'd you feel? Have you seen this movie before?
No, this was a first time watch for me.
That's what we do here on the Just Play It podcast. We're going to dive into some movies that we've seen, but it's been a long time. But the real goal here is to reach out and see these movies that have made an impression on the culture and their significance in cinema. And we're just interested. We want to do some investigating ourselves. What'd you think coming out of this?
Personally, I'd say this is a really good movie. This is a really good movie, a wildly innovative plot for the time, as far as expressing the dangers of machine learning and giving up human control to computers. And honestly, I think the message has really stood the test of time, to be honest, because these are still questions we are grappling with today. So I think that, the story itself really kind of understood the existential threat and, how humans view that balance of computers and humanity. And to have that kind of depth in a fun sci-fi action flick, or not action, I'd say thriller, sci-fi thriller flick, is really cool. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
That's good, because I knew last time when we were running through our list, you picked this movie out because you saw it was critically acclaimed, and I believe you were looking to maybe find some faults and just kind of really challenge if it was as good as it was. Was that true?
Yes, that was what I wanted to do. I like looking at movies that are critically acclaimed and
like, was it really that highly rated?
Exactly. And so from there, call it my fatal flaw. I like tearing things down.
Hey, don't we all? It's just human nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree. For me, I think you kind of cleared up some glitches and patched some plot holes for me. But all in all, this movie was very cutting edge for the time. Very bold. A lot of studios didn't really understand it. They're like, I don't understand computers. I don't know what this means. And to be fair, it was at the dawn of computers. And that kind of reflected on my experience watching this movie, because there was at points where I was a little lost on the technical logistics of it. But all in all, the cultural impact of this movie is pretty impressive.
Final review. Fight!
Well, Nick, here we are at the end. Can you hit us with a honest tagline for WarGames from 1983?
I will. So I think the initial tagline, hit it straight on the head, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot as well.
Gave a little Easter egg reference in their log line as well. They mentioned the back door.
They do. So when the U.S. military turns to a computer to make wartime decisions, a young hacker finds that computers aren't the best at deciphering a game from reality. 8.5 on my popcorn score.
8.5?
The only thing that kept it from a 9, only thing that kept it from a 9 were some of those plot holes. I feel like a 9 and above has to be real airtight as far as a lot of those plot holes go. But this was a great movie, had a great message, had a fun story, was acted really well. Matthew Broderick killed it. Ali Sheedy did great. Everyone else played their part extremely well. The movie moved along at a really good pace for me, and the outcome was satisfying. So 8.5 from your boy.
I love it.
That is a nice shared bag of some movie corn.
Even if it's a shared bag, it's still movie popcorn.
It's still theater corn.
Now, if I were to give this an honest logline after watching it, I would say this. U.S. military integrates cutting-edge computer technology into their arsenal, but an Achilles heel in the system ropes in a high school hacker, sparking mass war hysteria and hilarity. And for my popcorn points here, Nick, I'm going to give this a pretty fresh 7.7.
Okay.
For me, it seemed like you were a little bit more in tune or giving more leeway to the writers and the plot as far as my gripes with it and the technological aspects and why Joshua works and how it works. One of my biggest things was just like, get a kill switch, dude. At the end of the day.
That was addressed.
Was it?
It was. If you power it down or hit the kill switch, it has a defense mechanism that will fire off the nukes because they'll assume that it was malicious.
But then, I don't know about that. I feel like there's shutting it down, which is either you lose power or the enemy got a hold of it and wants to shut it down. But I feel like there should be some sort of convoluted. They didn't know about passwords and firewalls.
After the first glitch, I would have taken it offline. I'm with you on that. That's one of the plot holes that keeps it from the 9.
You brought it up. The security is a problem in this movie.
Big time problem.
Which may be the antagonist. But I think they should have had a kill switch that you had to enter multiple passwords that only a few select would know and shut it down. Would have avoided this entire problem. But like we said, we're using pencil as a password.
And I think there is a part of the movie that kind of leans on the fact that the audience isn't going to ask a lot of computer-based questions because
right, for the time.
We don't know how it works, right?
Exactly.
I'm 1983. I don't own a personal computer. I have no idea how any of this works. The idea of programming and whatnot, that's so high level. So I think it does kind of lean on the fact that there's not a lot of either A, computer experts out there, or B, I don't have to really explain it to you. You just have to accept that this is computers.
Right. The whole point of our pod is watching it in the modern days and seeing A, how it holds up, is it still relevant, and is it still a good movie?
Agreed.
Which I think we can both agree that it was.
It's worth a watch. If you haven't seen it, you should just play it.
All right. I think it's time to start heading gone. We're out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Can't wait.